Nobody in that funeral parlor expected the nurse to speak. But when Margot Ellison opened her mouth, the woman who had spent 3 years pretending not to exist, finally made the room go quiet. It started the way things always started in the Ellison family, with money and who had the most right to it. The reading of Bernard Ellison's will had been scheduled for a Tuesday 11 days after the funeral. The law office of Hartfield and Crane sat on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Halifax, with windows that looked out over the harbor and gray autumn water. Everything in the room cost more than most people made in a month. The chairs were leather, the table was walnut, the carpet swallowed footsteps whole. Margot arrived 8 minutes early. She sat in the chair closest to the door, not because she wanted to leave quickly, but because she had learned, over 3 years of caring for Bernard in his home, that sitting near exits gave her somewhere to look when the room became too much. She folded her hands in her lap. She wore the dark blue cardigan her mother had given her the Christmas before last. She had ironed it that morning at 5:30, standing in her apartment kitchen with the radio on low, because she did not know what else to do with the hours before something important happened. Celeste Ellison arrived 12 minutes late. She entered the way she always entered rooms, ahead of everyone else, chin lifted, handbag held at the elbow the way women in magazines held handbags. Her coat was charcoal cashmere, perfectly pressed. Her hair was the kind of blonde that cost a great deal to maintain, and an even greater deal to pretend was natural. Behind her came her husband, Prest, Bernard's only son, who had the face of a man who had been handsome once and spent his remaining years reminding people of it. He loosened his scarf without removing his coat. He did not look at Margot. Celeste did. "Oh," Celeste said. Not loudly, just enough to be heard by everyone in the room. "You're here?" Margot looked up. "Good morning. I wasn't sure you'd come." Celeste pulled out the chair directly across the table and sat with the careful ease of a woman who had rehearsed entering rooms since childhood. "I suppose the invitation was formal. One can't very well ignore formal things." Margot said nothing. The solicitor, a quiet man named Gerald Hartfield, cleared his throat. He had the look of someone who had sat across from grieving families long enough to recognize which kind of grief was real. He opened the folder in front of him. "We'll begin when everyone is settled," he said. Celeste placed her handbag on the table, just at the edge where it took up space without technically being in anyone's way. She glanced at the folder, then at Margot, then away. Preston leaned toward his wife. He murmured something. Celeste smiled, the small, tight smile of a woman who had already decided how the afternoon would end. Margot watched the harbor through the window. A container ship moved slowly across the gray water. She thought about the morning 3 years ago when she had first arrived at the Ellison house on the South Shore. A long stone property set back from the water, surrounded by birch trees that turned gold in September. Bernard had met her at the door himself, which surprised her because she had been told he could no longer walk without assistance. He had walked fine that morning. He walked to the door, looked her in the eye and said, "You're earlier than I expected. Come in. I'll make tea." That was Bernard Ellison. Gerald Hartfield began to read. The will covered the expected things first: charitable donations, property in 2 provinces, investment accounts, the house on the South Shore. Preston sat straighter when the house was mentioned. Celeste's fingers found the strap of her handbag. Then Gerald reached the section that changed the room. "To Margot Celine Aru," he read, "who served not as an employee but as a companion in the truest sense of the word, I leave the sum of $400,000, to be transferred within 90 days of this reading, alongside the rights to first purchase the property known as Linden Cottage, located on the rear parcel of the South Shore estate." The room took a breath. Preston's jaw moved. No sound came out. Celeste turned toward Margot slowly, the way a person turns toward the source of a smell they cannot yet identify. "Excuse me," Celeste said. Her voice was pleasant. That was the thing about Celeste. She was most dangerous when her voice was pleasant. "Could you repeat that, please?" The name was unclear. Gerald looked at her. "Margot Celine Aru, and the amount? $400,000. Silence. Then Celeste laughed. It was a short, bright sound like something breaking in a kitchen. "That's absurd," she said. "That's completely absurd. Bernard was not well. Toward the end he was not himself at all." "Preston, you know that. You said so yourself." "Ellison," Gerald said carefully, "the will was updated 14 months ago, witnessed by 2 independent parties, and certified by Dr. Hazel Moran of the Nova Scotia Capacity Assessment Board. Mr. Ellison was assessed as fully capable at the time of signing." Celeste's expression did not change, but something behind it did. A tiny shift, like a door opening in a wall that was supposed to have no doors. She turned to Margot. "You did this," she said, still pleasant, still measured. "You spent 3 years in that house, getting close to him, making yourself indispensable. Do you know what that is? It's manipulation. It's predatory. A nurse worming her way into an old man's trust." Margot looked at her. She did not look away. She did not lower her eyes. She had been lowering her eyes in this family's presence for 3 years. When Celeste came to visit and spoke about her as though she was not in the room. When Preston called her the help on the phone with his friends. When the invitations to family dinners stopped being extended once Bernard's health improved enough that they felt less necessary. She had swallowed all of it. Not because she was afraid. Because Bernard had asked her to in his quiet way on a cold November evening when they were sitting by the fire and he had told her the truth about his son. He is not a bad man, Bernard had said. He was a good boy once. He just married the wrong person and spent 20 years learning her habits. Margot had not argued. She had refilled his tea and let the subject rest. Now she looked at Celeste Ellison across the walnut table and chose her words the way her grandmother had taught her to choose words. Slowly, like selecting the right tool for a delicate job. I did not manipulate Bernard, Margot said. I sat with him through 2 surgeries and a fall that could have been much worse. I read to him when his eyes were too tired for the page. I drove him to Lunenburg in the rain because he wanted to see the boats one more time before winter. She paused. I never asked him for anything. Celeste's chin rose. People who want things rarely ask. Then how would you have recognized it in me? Margot said. When you barely came to visit. The room changed. The junior solicitor sitting beside Gerald stopped writing. The court reporter near the window looked up from her screen. Preston had been examining the edge of his cufflink and now stopped. Celeste's face did not flush. It went the opposite direction, pale and still and very careful. I visited regularly, she said. You came at Christmas, Margot said. You came in March when the estate lawyer called about the farm property. You came in July, but that was for the regatta and you stopped in for 40 minutes. She kept her voice even. Bernard kept a journal. He wrote about most days. The days you visited are easy to count. A journal, Celeste repeated. Her voice had lost some of its pleasantness. He gave it to me, Margot said. He said it was for no particular reason. I think it was because he wanted someone to remember things accurately. Preston spoke for the first time. That journal is estate property. Bernard gave it to her before he died, Gerald said quietly. A personal gift falls outside the estate inventory, Mr. Ellison. Preston sat back in his chair. Celeste looked at Margot the way people look at someone they thought they understood and are now revising. Not with respect, with something sharper. Recognition. You planned this? Celeste said. All of it, every cup of tea, every little errand, every late-night conversation. You planned to end up in that will. Margot thought of Bernard's hands the last week. How she had held them while the doctor spoke. How he had squeezed her fingers once and looked at her with eyes that were tired in every way a person could be tired and still said thank you. I planned to do my job, Margot said. I planned to give him a dignified end. I didn't know what was in the will until 20 minutes ago. That's convenient. It's the truth. Women like you, Celeste said. And something slipped in her voice, something real and ugly coming through the composure. Always know exactly what they're doing. You may dress it up in kindness, but the calculation is there. He was old, he was lonely, his family wasn't visiting enough and you made sure he knew it. Her voice rose slightly. You made yourself the good one, the devoted one, the one who was always there, and he rewarded you for the performance. The word performance landed in the room like something thrown. Margot looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, he told me about the Christmas you missed. Not because you were traveling, because you and Preston had been fighting about the Kelowna property, and you didn't come because you didn't want to see him while you were angry about his money. She said it without anger, without heat, just the way it was. He told me he sat by the window for 2 hours waiting for your car. The junior solicitor's pen was perfectly still. Preston looked at his hands. Celeste opened her mouth, then closed it. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Margot said. I'm telling you because you accused me of performing kindness. I wasn't performing. And I know the difference between the two of us because Bernard knew it, and he knew you, and he loved you anyway, and he still wrote what he wrote. Celeste's eyes had gone bright, not with tears, with the specific brightness of a woman who refuses to cry in front of someone she considers beneath her. She pressed her palms flat against the table. You will be contested, she said. Every cent of this will be challenged. We have lawyers. We have resources. We will drag this through the courts for as long as it takes. You can do that, Gerald said gently. You're entitled to pursue legal avenues. But I should be transparent with you. The capacity certification is thorough and recent. The independent witnesses are credible. The language of the bequest is unambiguous. Everything is ambiguous when you apply enough pressure, Preston said. The first real sentence he had contributed. He said it to the table and not to anyone. Margot looked at him. She had always felt something like sorrow for Preston, not pity. Sorrow. Because she had seen Bernard wait for his son's calls and been there when they didn't come. Because she had once found a photograph on Bernard's desk. Preston, maybe 12 years old, standing on a dock with a fishing rod and a laugh that lit up the whole frame, and she had thought, this is who he was before. Preston, she said. He looked at her. She could see him preparing a response. He talked about you, Margot said. He talked about you a great deal. Preston said nothing. He kept a photograph of you as a boy, the dock photo. He kept it in the left drawer of his desk and I saw him take it out more than once. Her voice softened just slightly. He missed you. Not the version that came at Christmas or called about properties. He missed the boy in that photo. He talked about teaching you to sail. He talked about a trip you took to Newfoundland when you were 15. Something moved in Preston's face. Celeste put a hand on his arm. Margot looked at that hand. How quickly it came down, how practiced the gesture was. He didn't leave you less because he loved you less, Margot said. He left me something because he thought I needed it and wouldn't ask for it. That's all this is. That is not all this is, Celeste said sharply. What this is a manipulative, Celeste. Preston said it quietly. She stopped. It was the first time Margot had ever heard him stop her. The room absorbed the silence. Gerald gathered his papers. He did it carefully, the way solicitors do when they are giving a room time to breathe without making it obvious. He stacked the documents, he uncapped and recapped his pen. He set the folder at a precise angle. Then he said, "There is one additional matter." Celeste looked at him. "Bernard left a letter," Gerald said, "sealed separately from the will. He asked that it be read aloud at this meeting, in the presence of all named parties." He removed an envelope from beneath the folder. The paper was cream-colored and the seal was wax, the deep red of burgundy. Preston straightened almost imperceptibly. Gerald broke the seal and unfolded 2 handwritten pages. Bernard's handwriting was small and precise. The handwriting of an engineer who had spent decades drawing plans. Margot had seen it on birthday cards and grocery lists and the edges of newspaper margins. She knew it the way you know the handwriting of someone you have spent years beside. Gerald began to read. To Preston, to Celeste and to Margot. "I am aware that the 3 of you in a room together without me present is something of an experiment. I ask your patience with one another for the duration of this letter, which I have kept as brief as my feelings will allow. Preston, you are my son. You have been my son since the Tuesday morning in October when the doctor placed you in my arms and I did not know what to do with you, and simply stood there until a nurse said I could sit down. Everything I have built, I built with you somewhere in my mind. The boat lessons, the Newfoundland trip, the photograph on my desk that I hope you knew was there. I am not leaving you less because I love you less. I am leaving you what is yours because it is considerable, and because you have not gone without. What I am leaving Margot is what she would never have asked for, and what I could not leave her without feeling, in whatever comes next, that I had been a coward. She held my hand through the kind of nights you do not know about because you were not there. I do not say this to wound you. I say it because she deserves to be acknowledged for it in writing, by name, without apology. Celeste. I have watched you take very good care of my son for 22 years. I have also watched you take very poor care of him in ways I suspect he has not yet fully understood. I do not dislike you, I never did, but I am tired of pretending I did not see clearly. Margot, you asked me once what I wanted to be remembered for. I told you I didn't know. That was not entirely honest. I want to be remembered as a man who at the end chose to tell the truth even when it was expensive." Gerald set the pages down. Nobody spoke. The gray harbor light came through the windows at a low afternoon angle, the kind of light that makes everything look older and more honest than it is. Celeste sat very still. The composure had not broken, but it had done what composure does when it cannot hold everything inside it. It had gone rigid, like a wall too thin for what it was holding back. Preston was looking at the table, or at something below it, something Margot could not see. His expression was the expression of a man who had just been told something he already knew and had spent a long time avoiding. Margot looked at the wax seal Gerald had placed on the corner of the folder. Dark red. The color of wine, of old curtains, of things kept in rooms where the windows don't open often. She thought about the last morning. Bernard had been having a good week by then, better than the doctors expected. They had sat on the porch with coffee and watched a great blue heron standing in the shallows below the property. Bernard had said nothing for a long time. Then he had said, "I owe more people apologies than I can reach. You're not one of them, Margot. I want you to know that." She had told him he didn't need to say it. He had said, "I know I don't need to." That's exactly when it means something. She pressed her hands flat against her knees under the table to steady them. Preston looked up. He looked at Margot, not at his wife, not at the solicitor. He looked at her directly. "The Newfoundland trip," he said. His voice was low, slightly rough. "We caught cod. He made me clean them myself. I complained the whole time. He told me," Margot said. "He told you that? He said you complained and then you ate 3 servings at dinner and didn't say a word." Something crossed Preston's face, not a smile. The memory of one. Celeste watched her husband. The hand that had been ready to come down on his arm did not move. "The cottage," Preston said. "The one he mentioned. Linden Cottage. He told me about it," Margot said. "I never went inside." "It's where he worked," Preston said. "When I was young. He used to go there in the mornings and draw plans. He had a drafting table by the window." He stopped. "I used to bring him coffee because my mother sent me. I'd leave it on the step and go. He always came to the door and called after me. He always wanted to show me whatever he was working on." "Did you stay?" Margot asked. Preston was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes." The room felt different, not resolved, not warm. But different in the way a room feels when the thing that has been making the air tight finally gets named. Celeste set her handbag on her lap. She looked at the window, at the harbor, at nothing specific. "I want to say," she began, and then stopped. Margot waited. Celeste set her jaw. Tried again. I want to say that I don't believe this changes the legal question. That's your right, Gerald said. However, the word came out slow, like something being lowered carefully. I also want to say that. She paused. The composure was still intact, but it was working very hard. I am aware that we did not come as often as we should have. The admission landed quietly. Margot did not respond immediately. She had learned in 3 years of sitting beside a man who was dying slowly, that silence after an admission is a form of respect. Then she said, he knew you loved him. Celeste looked at her. The brightness in her eyes was still there, but it had shifted into something that was not entirely controlled. He said so, Margot continued. He said, they love me in the way people love things they expect to always be there. He wasn't angry about it, he was just honest. Celeste looked away. Gerald stacked the final pages. He produced 3 copies of a document. He slid them across the table. These are acknowledgement copies of the will's contents, he said. No action required today. The estate process will proceed through the standard channels. I'd encourage all parties to take a few days before making any legal decisions. He said it to Celeste specifically. She heard it. She picked up the document. The meeting ended without fanfare. People put on their coats. The junior solicitor collected the recording equipment. Preston signed the acknowledgement copy with a pen he produced from his own pocket. He handed it back to Gerald without comment. At the door, Celeste paused. She did not turn all the way around. She angled toward Margot, just slightly, the way a person stands when they have something to say, and have not yet decided whether to say it. The letter, Celeste said. The part about what he wanted to be remembered for. Yes, Margot said. He told you that, before he wrote it? He said something like it. On the porch, a few months before the end. Celeste was quiet for a moment. Did she stop, reconsidered? Was he at peace? Margot thought about the heron, the coffee cooling on the railing. Bernard's hands wrapped around his mug, his eyes on the water, his breathing slow and even and present. Yes, Margot said, he was. Celeste nodded once. She turned and walked out. Preston lingered in the doorway for a moment. He looked at Margot with the look of a man who has many things to say and the habit of saying very few of them. The cottage, he said. If you buy it. The first purchase option. I don't know yet. Margot said honestly. Preston nodded. He would have wanted someone in it. He hated the idea of it sitting empty. He adjusted his scarf. There's a drafting table by the window, you can do whatever you want with it. But it's good light in the morning. Then he left. Margot stood in the middle of the room for a moment after they were gone. The harbor was turning dark gold in the low afternoon sun. A seagull crossed the window unhurried. Gerald was quiet while he finished packing the folder. When he was done, he looked at her. People challenge wills every day, he said. But in my experience, when both parties walk out of a room like that, the challenge rarely materializes. Margot put on her coat. He knew what he was doing, she said. He always did. Gerald nodded. He was a careful man. Very. She took the elevator down alone. In the lobby, she stood for a moment outside the building with the harbor smell coming in on the wind. October in Halifax, cold salt air. The kind of day that makes everything feel both ending and beginning. She thought about Linden Cottage, about a drafting table and a window with good morning light. She had grown up in a 2-room apartment in Dartmouth with her mother and grandmother, and a collection of library books that rotated every 3 weeks because they couldn't keep them. She had studied for her nursing exams at the kitchen table. She had worked night shifts for 6 years before the placement agency sent her to the South Shore. She had never owned anything. $400,000. A cottage with a drafting table, and a man who had looked at her on a cold November evening and said, "You're the most decent person I've met in 20 years, and I want you to know that I know it." She had told him he was being dramatic. He had said, "I am 91 years old and I have earned dramatic." A woman passing on the sidewalk glanced at her, the way people glance at someone standing still in a city where everyone is moving. Margot straightened, pulled her coat closed against the wind. She had a bus to catch. She had soup thawing on the counter at home. She had a morning shift Thursday at the clinic on Roby Street, and a book she had been meaning to finish for 3 weeks, and a phone call she owed her mother. Life unchanged, waiting. But underneath all of it, steady and new and surprisingly not frightening. The knowledge that somewhere on the south shore of Nova Scotia, a cottage sat in a birch grove with a window that caught the morning light, and it was hers if she wanted it. And for the first time in a very long time, Margot Celine Aru let herself want something.